Well, hello. Welcome to the Top Left's webinar. We want to welcome everybody who's here. We thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time today. We're going to take about 45 minutes here today to explain a lot about Kanban and managing service delivery in Kanban. We're going to talk about how to eliminate the chaos in your MSP using agile techniques, especially Kanban. And we're going to give you a framework to deliver your service very quickly and efficiently, making your customers happy, meeting your SLAs with the team that you have today. And then when that's done, only if you want to, I am happy to show you the software that we have developed ourselves to make the practices that I'm going to explain, to make them actually make them practical. So yeah, stick around, and if you stick around to the end, then I have a special offer to help you get started with that. So find the we want to just do a quick tech check. Find the chat section in the webinar tool and type in your name and your company name and your city. We want to hear about where everybody's from. I'm curious to see how many regions we have represented here. While you're doing that, let me introduce myself. My name is Matt Fox, and my title is the VP of TopLeft. TopLeft is a unit of an MSP, known as Kirchhoff Technologies. We've been around since 2007 in the Vancouver, British Columbia area. And I've been with the company since 2010. I've led TopLeft since we launched it as its own product in 2019 or so. I spent the last 15 years involved in the IT industry, a variety of contexts like help desk at a bank. I did support for a network SD-WAN product, service and triage work at KTI, Kirchhoff Tech, and even help desk in a prison back in the day. And of course, at TopLeft, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of MSPs about their struggles with service delivery. So I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly about service delivery. Today, we're going to teach what we found works at KTI and at many of our customers. So I just want to welcome everybody who's here. John Paul from Coastal IT Consulting in Southwest Florida. Welcome, John Paul. And Matt from VirtuWorks. Hey, from Miami. So we've got Florida well represented here. So welcome. And anybody else comes, toss your name and your company there in in the chat. We'd like to hear where you're from. So let me just share, and we'll get it at my slides here. Let me explain a little bit about what had happened with KTI, a little bit more about our story. So we were using this is KTI here, staff. We were using one of the two traditional methods of managing work. Okay, so that was known as the free-for-all mode. That is where, so you may be familiar with this, that is where technicians keep their eyes on the triage board and they pick their own tickets, and then they've got complete responsibility for working that ticket all the way until it's done, okay, using whatever method they want to do. So it is a free-for-all. What tends to happen is that, so if you were to take a typical ticket and watch the statuses that it goes through from when it starts to when it ends, it would be something like this. It would start out in new, obviously go to in progress, then maybe go to waiting, in progress, waiting, back and forth, just back and forth a whole bunch of times until eventually sometime it gets done. So there's very little structure around it, and it's just not very successful. So it can lead to a few problems, okay? Like this is what we had. We had way too many tickets started but not finished. We had like 400 open tickets with only 10 technicians, so they were overwhelmed, lots to do, but they didn't really know what was the most important. It took a long time to close the tickets. The technicians would cherry pick the tickets, the ones they didn't want to do just would get ignored, and the customers would feel neglected. They would learn that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and definitely you don't want to have your customers learning that. And everyone was siloed and no teamwork. Okay, so that was a problem with what we were doing. There is another traditional dispatch method, and we call that one the Tetris method. Okay, so you might be familiar with that. Like Tetris, this dispatch method is similar in that you're trying to fit a certain thing into a very specific and small space, the smallest space that you can find. So that is where when a ticket comes in, the dispatcher puts a time estimate on the ticket, and they assign a technician, and they find the smallest earliest time that's still free in their calendar and try to fit it in there. Okay, so this is fairly common actually. ConnectWise even has a term for it. They teach this. They say to paint your calendar green, and my life is my calendar. And so, I mean, it sounds effective. What's actually wrong with it though? Well, first of all, it's quite a bit of work. The dispatcher has to estimate the time for the ticket. Then they got to select a tech. And then they got to find a free spot in that tech's calendar. Okay, so even when it works really well, it's a fair bit of work. Second, for a lot of types of work, the customer just doesn't really care what time of the day it gets done. You know, they say just get it done. So putting it into the calendar doesn't actually provide value to the customer because they don't care about it being in the customer. And the third is it's really, really fragile. So any sort of little change can just cause a whole lot of rework that's necessary. You know, it could be that a ticket takes longer than expected. Obviously, we know that happens all the time. It could be that a technician is, you know, unexpectedly not available during the day, and so you find that tickets might be rescheduled, you know, 2 or 3 or 4, even more times. I once heard from a dispatcher that she was spending 2 hours a day just scheduling up the work for 2 engineers. So it's not very efficient. And as I just want to be clear, some work always needs to be in the calendar, right? If you're going to go send somebody on site, the customer expects them at a certain time. So that sort of work needs to be in the calendar. But a lot of work that MSPs do, it doesn't need to be in the calendar. So we can work better if we make that sort of distinction. So yeah, back to KTI. You know, we had all this trouble despite the fact that we were using a perfectly good PSA. We were using ConnectWise. The tickets had enough data, you know, summaries and descriptions and notes and whatever. But the free for all we found leads to bad service. And Tetris mode is just you know, the calendar dispatch makes everybody stressed and it can't handle changes. And we hear, you know, the same exact complaints from Autotask users. So yeah, so the solution that we found was Kanban. So we were familiar with Kanban and agile techniques from our software. We had some experience in software development where Kanban has been more well known for a long, long time. So we decided to try it out in our MSP, and we found out that it works. You know, we have made major improvements to our workflows, and you know, well, of course, we're still very busy, but we found that we feel like we have it under control. We can understand our own work and much better for keeping customers happy. So I'm going to teach you to use those techniques, how to use Kanban to get the right balance of structure and flexibility to manage service in your MSP. And then, like I said, after that, I'll show you the software that we use to do it and give you an offer so you can get started fast with some training. Then we'll take questions as well, anything about service delivery or use for a Kanban tool. So yeah, you can feel free to type in your questions at any time, and we will get to them at the end. You can put them in the question and answer section or in the chat. So let's start to talk about Kanban. So what is it? So it is a framework. It comes out of like Toyota automobile manufacturing, actually, even back in the 1940s. So despite that a lot of people haven't yet heard about it, it's been around for some time. The board that you see there on the screen, that is the most recognizable part of Kanban. It is about representing work visually. In fact, that's kind of what the name means. The kan means in Japanese visual, and ban or ban, that means card. So those cards represent the work that we need to do, and the columns on the board represent the stage of the work. We see the work start out on the left, move to the right, and that represents how close it is to being done, or that it is done if it's all the way on the right. It has to do with more than managing the workers. It has to do with managing the work. And another way to term it is pull versus push. It permits the technicians or the workers to pull work to them when they are ready to take on new work, rather than having a dispatcher push work onto somebody who might not actually have capacity to take on that work. And like I said, it's been widely adopted in software development for a long time already. And now it's becoming more known in other industries, IT and even other industries. There was you may have heard of Trello. It's probably the most well-known, you know, like Kanban board software. It's sold. This was years ago already. I think this was 4 years ago already, 5 years even ago. They sold for, you know, big bucks for 125 million. What I mean is they're not. This is not about this is not industry specific. Like this is everybody uses it. So this sort of thing is becoming much more well-known. A company went public that you know they do Kanban boards as well, big enough to even go public a number of years ago. Some of the benefits here are that specific benefits to Kanban and the Kanban boards are that you can see your work in progress, meaning the things that you've started and haven't finished yet. You're able to limit those things. Limit the work in progress. I'll tell you why that's important. You can be your whole team can be more responsive. You can stop work from falling through the cracks because you have a place where you can see it and it doesn't get lost. You can improve the flow of your work, identify and address those bottlenecks. Stop feeling overwhelmed. Communicate. Like, it's a great way to communicate with your team about the work that you're doing. And we always, Kanban itself emphasizes adopting it with small and manageable changes. It doesn't say to throw away everything you're doing all at once and replace it with some new structure. It's all about just, hey, let's look at what we're doing now. Let's change a few things about it, just small things, so that eventually we get to a great Kanban workflow. But there's never a big change. It's all in small changes. So this is this is kind of this is the easiest, simplest way to explain what we're talking about here. Looking at a Kanban board, and if these represent the columns on a Kanban board, the work, as you look at the board, moves from left to right. The cards, for an MSP, the cards would represent the tickets that you're working on, and we expect to see those start out on the left when a new ticket comes in, and then move through the workflow till the right. They're on the right when they're complete. The workers are separate. They are different. The individual people who are doing this work, they focus starting at the right, and they look for work to do starting at the right, and then they move towards the left. What that does is help you to focus on finishing work rather than starting new work, because when they do that, when they work from the right towards the left, they will be looking for the work that is closest to being done. So that's what helps keep your work in progress low and keeps your team fast and effective. So we have a name for this. We call this the service velocity visualizer. You can see, obviously it's a good way to visualize it, and it helps you increase your velocity by working more effectively with the team that you have. So let's talk about it. How do we actually do this? There's going to be 3 key decisions that your team is going to need to make when you adopt a Kanban practice. It has to do with you're going to identify the key stages of your service pipeline. You're going to adapt your triage method. There may not actually be that much that you have to do, but we do need to look at that. And you're going to select a dispatch method. So you're going to think, I'll tell you the 2 main ways that you can do the dispatch, and you can decide which one is right for you at the time. So first of all, the stages of your work, we got to look at this. You'll recognize these. These are going to have to do with the ticket statuses that you have already in your PSA. And you might need to add some new ones, and there may be ones that you don't use, but basically these are the common ones. New is a stage. That's when it's been submitted from the customer, from the email connector, portal, or phone, or whatever. Ready, that is when it's ready for starting. Basically, it's gone through your triage and dispatch process, and it is ready for an engineer to start when an engineer is ready, when they have capacity. Started, which is, people also call this in progress. Okay, that is for everything that the engineers have started already, and that they could work if they so chose. Okay, it's not actually showing showing what's being handled at this very moment, and that's kind of why, like, we prefer the term started, because in progress, does sound like we're working on it in this very moment. But that's not actually the most important thing to know about it. The work that has already started and is in your engineer's court to do, that has a huge impact on how fast you can turn around those tickets. Like, if you think about the difference between an engineer who has only one thing that they've started, like it's the thing that they are working on right now, versus an engineer who's, obviously they're working on something, but they also have 20 other things that they've started, and that are still, they still have the next step on that work. Like, there's a big difference between those scenarios, that those 2 different engineers, based on, like, if you need to send them some new work, or like assign them some new work to start at some point, the one who only has one thing that they're working on is going to start that next work fairly soon. the one who has 20 or 21 things that they're working on, it's going to take them ages. Like you have no idea when they're going to get to this new work that you'd like them to start. So, I mean, and you notice that as the manager or dispatcher, but the customers are going to notice that as well. So that's part of the reason why it's important to keep the started or in progress work very low. The waiting is another one. So that has to do with things that are the next step on that ticket is something outside of the team. Typically, most commonly, you're waiting on the customer for some information or for them to do something. It could also be waiting on a vendor. It could be waiting on parts in the mail or things as well. Scheduled is those things that I mentioned where the next step of that ticket is that it has to happen at a certain time of day. So that would be, for example, going on site, or maybe it's a scheduled network outage that was coordinated with the customer or something like that. So there's nothing to do with that right now. We are going to wait until the calendar says, yeah, it's time to do that. Finally, review. That's one. Not everybody has this, but that would be where if someone does some work and then another engineer just reviews that to make sure that it was done according to the practices, the requirements, and so on. And finally, completed. Obviously, everybody has that. That means it's done. So you would lay out a Kanban board, something like this, with some of those example stages. So the columns here would represent the key stages. Like I said, new, ready, waiting, scheduled, started, and completed as some common examples. And then each of these cards represents the work that is in those stages. So it gives us a really clear view about where everything is. Okay, we can see what's done recently. We can see what's been started. What's scheduled, waiting in the calendar to do. Things that are waiting on everybody else, we see what's ready to start. If this list got really, really long, then maybe we need to hire somebody. Maybe we need to do some overtime, or maybe we just need maybe we need to adopt some more effective practices like Kanban. Okay, so it immediately answers your questions about this in the ways that your PSA software just doesn't answer very well. Okay, so that's about the stages. The next choice you need to make is your triage method. So what does triage do? Okay, so it provides a chance to check the ticket. Okay, you can check things like the company and the contact, the SLA and things like that. You can identify emergency tickets because you want to know if an emergency ticket comes in, you need to work it right now. You want to have a process for noticing those things. You can ensure it has all the necessary information. You can set a realistic budget for the technicians, yeah, so that's some of the reasons to have a triage process. If you already have a really good triage process, you may not need to do anything just because you adopt Kanban. What I mean is you can keep most of the key things that you already do with the Kanban method. You would have a new step. Basically on the Kanban board, what would happen is that when you do the triage process, then the ticket moves from new to ready. And yeah, and that's the stage there. The new step would be to rank the ticket in the ready column. So yeah, because one thing I didn't mention is that we have these columns and they're good for visualizing what work is in what stages, but there's an additional thing that that is meaningful is that the order of the ticket, actually let me show you, the ordering of the tickets here is significant, especially in the ready column. Yeah, actually, it might not be significant in every column, but especially in the ready column, which is where the tickets land after they've been triaged. The ordering is important. Okay, this is the most important ticket to do next. After this one's done, then that one. After that one's done, then that one. Okay, so the ordering, especially in this column, is very important. So that would be another step in. That would be the additional Kanban step in your triage method is rank the ticket in the ready column. We know that some technicians, some teams are small, right? And maybe you don't have a dedicated triage person. So if you are small and you're disciplined, you can probably get away without having a dedicated triage person. Or it doesn't need to be a dedicated person, but what I mean is have a dedicated role that it maybe have team members that rotate through a role. So you can say who's responsible for it today or this week or whatever. Sometimes if you're small and disciplined, you can even get away without having that as a dedicated role, but only if you're very small and disciplined. Okay, so that's the triage process. Third thing that you need to decide is your dispatch method. Okay, so a a lot of people think of triage and dispatch as one and the same thing, and usually you can think about that, but here we do need to get into the details, so we're going to consider them separately. Okay, triage is just, how do you be aware, that a new ticket is a good ticket. You are noticing if there's emergency tickets and things like that. Dispatch, though, is more about how do we get that work assigned to the right person. Um, so there's two main ways that you can do that in Kanban. One is to have multiple queues. Okay, so basically a new ticket comes in, and you do your triage. Dispatch means assigning it to a person. Okay, so this is you certainly, if you came from the Tetris method of dispatching work, then you're already assigning the work. Okay, so this is a bit similar in that regard, except that we're not going to put it into the calendar. This is yeah, so a ticket gets assigned to somebody immediately. So each technician sort of has their own queue of work. A technician is working on one thing, and then they have their own queue of work that they know they're going to work on. Okay, the second option is a single or a team queue. Okay, so in this mode, work does not get assigned to an individual technician until someone actually starts it. So when an engineer is free to take on new work, they just come and take what's at the beginning here, claim that for themselves, assign themselves to the ticket, and then they work on that. Okay, so as a way that you're probably familiar with, just to explain this in a little more detail, you are probably familiar with seeing this in terms of like a shopping, a store checkout. So this would be the traditional model of a grocery store checkout. Okay, when you're ready to check out, you choose which cashier you're going to go to. You line up there, and the cashier serves one person after the next, and you know that you're in that you're in that cashier's line. Okay. However, more and more stores are having a single queue where you do not know. You just get in one single line, and you don't get assigned to a particular cashier until you get to the front of the line. Okay, and so that's very much like this. There's pros and cons of each. The technician queue, the benefit is that you can assign work to the engineers based on the nature of the work, so that you don't have to have uniform training and expertise in your team. Meaning, if a ticket comes in and it can only be done by some senior engineer, you're free to assign that work to the senior engineer. When work comes in for a junior engineer, you can assign it to a junior engineer. Okay, so meaning you don't have to have uniform expertise in your team. The advantage of the team queue is that it's a lot more responsive. Okay, so new work starts when any technician becomes free. So if we go back here, in this work, if say that this ticket for this person is very challenging, okay, and it ends up going over budget, okay, that delays all of this work behind it. So that's a disadvantage for any of the other, for all of these tickets. The customers are going to notice that because this ticket got delayed. The team queue here has a bit of an advantage in that if this ticket goes way over budget, turns out it was challenging, there's still 4 engineers here who are pulling work off the queue. So even if this is a problem ticket, this still keeps flowing pretty well. It is a little bit slower than maybe it otherwise would be, but not in any noticeable way. The queue here keeps moving, and even when there's a problem. Okay, so it's a lot more flexible in that regards. It is more efficient as well because it actually eliminates a bit of the work of the dispatcher. They don't actually have to. They don't have to assign it to anybody. They can just all they do is rank it in a queue, which actually I mentioned as part of the triage process. But if that's your process, there's actually very little to do. So it's very, very efficient. It's also efficient in that you don't have to monitor for work getting delayed. Like if this ticket ends up being a problem and it's delaying all this work, then the dispatcher probably wants to be aware of that so that they can move some of these tickets over to the other people so that they still move. Whereas that sort of thing isn't required at all with this method of work, because it's designed into the system that this work will just keep flowing. So it saves work overall. It is possible to have a hybrid method. Okay, so we'll take a little bit from both. So that would be when work is assigned only when it requires specialized training or expertise. So basically, if a ticket comes in and it can only be done by your senior engineers, only then do you assign it to a senior engineer, but you leave everything else unassigned and use the team queue for that. So that is actually, that kind of relates to support tiers, in that you could have all of your work flow into a team queue for your tier 1, and then only if it can't be done at tier 1, then does it get bumped up to tier 2. So if you have a very strict tiers within your team, then you're probably already doing, or I should say, you may already be doing some of this, and it would certainly be easier to have a team queue if you have very strict tiers already. What I would suggest as getting started, if you're like most MSPs, is actually get started with the technician queue first, because it's probably the closest to what you're already doing. You can always move towards a hybrid or a team method in the future. So you're not making a decision that you have to stick with forever or for a long, long time. Like, you can change this as soon as you want to. So don't think that you're making a big choice right now. Okay, so this is what this would actually look like in Kanban board. You would have your columns here, and we add what we call swim lanes. Okay, so this is how we see which work is assigned to which people. So we have unassigned work here. The only work that's unassigned is in the new in the unassigned swim lane is stuff that's in the new. So basically, this is the dispatcher's work to triage and dispatch. Then we have a lane here for Alice, and we see all the work that's assigned to Alice in whatever stage it might be, and then Bob as well. So this is how we see that on a Kanban board. If you use the technician queue method, meaning each technician has their own queue of work, then you drag it, as part of the triage and dispatch process, you drag it out of new and you put it in either Alice or Bob's or the rest of your team. You drop it in one of their ready columns. So you assign it to them by putting it in their swim lane here, and then you rank it. So, first ticket, second ticket. So Alice would know that when she's ready for new work, she comes here to her own queue, her own swim lane, ready column, and takes whatever's at the top there. And Bob knows, comes to his swim lane and takes what's at the top there. So that's a technician's queue. Team queue is a little bit different. That's what this looks like. You have only one queue of work here. So when it's in the ready, it does not get assigned. So there's nothing assigned to Alice or Bob in the ready column. It's all unassigned here. So, but it's still ranked. So like, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the ordering of the work here. So if Alice was to be ready for new work, she would come up, pick the top thing, pull it over to her started column, and assign it to herself there. And then this would be the next priority ticket there. Okay, so that is that's the 3 main decisions you need to make: the stages and the triage and the dispatch process. Now let's talk about, how do the engineers work? How do the technicians work in a system like this? Okay, so like I said, the work moves from the left to the right on the board. The workers move from the right to the left on the board. And the reason that they do that is because the stuff that's towards the right side of the board is closest to being complete. And when they work on that stuff first, then you are delivering, this is really key, you're delivering the value to the customer. I should say the customers don't care about a half-finished ticket, right? So anything that you have some investment into, the technician's done part of the work on it, but they haven't finished it. Maybe the technician is half done the work, but until it's totally done, the customer doesn't get any of the value out of that. They get the value from that work all at the very end. Okay, so that's why we don't want to, that's another, one of the many reasons that we don't want to have a whole lot of half-finished work. We want to have a small amount of work that gets done very quickly, because as we can only tell the customer, hey, we've helped you, here's the solution to your problem, only when it gets to be totally complete. So we want to start working on the stuff that's closest to being complete, and that's the stuff that's on the right side of the board, hence starting on the right and working towards the left. Okay, and they only start when their started column is empty and after checking the waiting column. We don't want to be like, this is how we keep the work in progress low, is by focusing on the things that are already finished, getting those done, and only when there's nothing still started or in progress, and there's nothing available in the waiting column. You want to check through the waiting column, make sure that you haven't got the response, the answer to your question that you were waiting for, things like that. Making sure that there's nothing in the waiting column that's available now. Then go on ahead and start some new work where you take the top ticket from the ready column. So what does that look like? Again, like your work is moving from the left towards the right. The technicians are moving from the right towards the left. And so they start over here. Now, obviously, they don't have to worry about the completed column. So they would look at the started column. For Alice, Alice does have work in the started column already, so she shouldn't be starting any new work. So she should focus on these 2 tickets, move those over to complete before she starts any new work. Bob, though, Bob has no tickets right now in the started or in progress column, so he's okay to start new work. He can come over here and pull something out of the ready column, pull it to started, and work on that. So actually, I should say the things that can happen to a ticket when it's in started. There's a few things that can happen once it's been put in started. So the best case is that the technician just completes the work and moves it to completed. Obviously, that's the best case. Another case is that it can become blocked on the customer or somebody else. Okay, so in that case, you make a note. The technician makes a note about the next step and moves it backwards on the board, moves it towards the left to the waiting column. It could be that then they find out the work requires something to be coordinated with the customer, so we're going to put it into the calendar, and so they make a calendar entry and they put it in the scheduled column there. It could be sometimes too that you just exhaust that particular technician exhausts all the reasonable efforts on that ticket. Then they either need to escalate it or they go back to the customer. And so that sort of thing is really specific to your team, so we won't go into that too much today. I'll point out, though, that the ticket never goes back to ready. It always goes to completed or waiting or scheduled, because once we start working on a ticket, we want to finish working on that ticket as soon as possible. So I'll say say again, the technicians still observe their calendars. Because they are going to have some meetings and they are going to have some scheduled tickets. But the difference between what we're doing now and something like the Tetris scheduling method is that in the Tetris scheduling method, most of their day is booked out. Even 100% of their day is booked out with meetings and scheduled tickets. So there's really there's no other way to do any work there because their whole day is scheduled. Whereas with Kanban, the meetings and the scheduled tickets should be a minority of their time. So their calendar is actually mostly free. So it gives them the bulk of their time to get through the work on their Kanban board. But they still do watch the calendar. If a meeting comes up or a scheduled ticket comes up, then they stop what they're doing and they work on what the calendar calls for. You can assign your waiting tickets to be assigned to your dispatcher or service manager. It doesn't necessarily need to be the engineers that are following up on those waiting tickets. If you do that, just make sure that they do not. What I mean is, if you do assign that to a single person to watch for those things, make sure you actually assign that in your PSA so that it shows up properly. And so while the engineers are working on their work, the role of a dispatcher or service manager is to monitor the work. So I want to mention some of these things that you're looking for. These are going to be problems that you want to know about so that you can fix them. Okay, so one is a due date versus progress. So if there's some sort of due date for a ticket, you want to be monitoring that to make sure that the ticket's progressing such that we're going to complete it by the due date. So look at the due date. The hours logged versus the budget or the estimated hours. You want to make sure that those tickets are not exceeding their budgets, and if they do, you know about them and you figure out how you're going to maybe adjust the budget or do something else on the ticket, bring in an expert to make sure that you get those things under or without going too far over budget. Another thing is you want to be watching for things that are sitting in the column for too long. Now, each column can have its own length of time that a ticket can sit there and still be acceptable. So like, for example, the started or in progress column, you wouldn't want to see a ticket sitting there for 5 days. Probably 2, maybe 3 days is the longest that you would want to see a ticket sitting there. So if you see it stop there, you want to know. However, it could sit in the waiting column for a week, or maybe even 2 weeks, and that would still be okay. A long time without a time entry or note would be a problem. Again, it would be a problem sooner in the started column compared to the waiting column. You want to know about bottlenecks. Okay, that would be something where work is kind of, you're getting a big queue of work frequently. The most common case for an MSP is that your senior engineers are a bottleneck because you send them a large proportion of your work, and they just get bogged down because there's a lot more tickets going to the senior engineers than the junior engineers, or they're more complex tickets and they take longer. And so that they just build up a big queue of work that doesn't exist for the other engineers, and then they slow everything down. So you want to be aware of that so you can fix that. Some ways to resolve that are to, especially for the bottlenecks, you reassign the work. You can move some work to a less busy engineer. The Kanban boards help with this because you can see very easily all the work that's assigned to an engineer, and then you can you can see that work, and you can see, okay, does all of that work assigned to my senior engineer really need to be assigned to the engineer, or can some of this work actually be done by a more junior person, and then reassign that work? It's a lot easier to do with a Kanban board than with your PSA. One technique is to swarm a ticket. That means to assign a bunch of engineers. You basically assign, your whole team or part of your team. Say, like, this is our #1 priority. This is some sort of critical ticket, or it's an important customer and they've been waiting on it a long time. We're not working on anything else till we get that one ticket done, or at least get that one ticket unblocked and moving forward. So that's called swarming it. You can suspend new assignments for an engineer, meaning the engineer, you say, hey, so-and-so, you're just, what you have ongoing right now is enough. I'm not going to send you any new work, so that you can actually work down this large work in progress that you have. You can reprioritize, change the ranking of a ticket. That's fine to do in Kanban. You are free to change how those tickets are ranked at any time you want. Sometimes you just need to remind an engineer to follow up. And sometimes a method to improve how the work is laid out is to split up a ticket. So that can happen if it was too big, for example, or maybe it's unexpectedly complex, but you have the main work complete. Meaning basically it's something that you can go to the customer and you can say, okay, we didn't get all of it done, but we got the most important 80% done. And so we're going to deliver that 80% to you, and we're going to go back and we are going to work on that remaining 20%, but we know that's not the most important work for you. So that's going to be delayed a little bit, but hey, at least here you get your most critical 20%. Sometimes you just need to reduce the scope or increase the budget as well. And sometimes to fix a problem, you just need to cancel the work. Okay, so if the business case is gone, or the client ghosted you and you can't get an answer that you need, sometimes you just cancel it. So yeah, that's it. Let's just review a little bit. This is the service velocity visualizer. The work on the Kanban board moves from the left to the right, and the workers move from the right to the left. And yeah, that's how we do it. It's way better than the free-for-all method because there's sufficient structure to prevent the big work in progress from growing, and to prevent the work from falling through the cracks. It's better than the Tetris method, meaning like the calendar dispatch, because it's much more flexible. When things don't go according to plan, you don't have to reschedule any work because you never did reschedule most of the work. And when urgent work comes in, it can still go at the top of the queue, and you don't have to reschedule things. But you still have just as much control over when the work gets done as if you were using the calendar, and it's just a lot less work for the engineer, or for the dispatcher, I should say. Okay, so some of the techniques that like this have made big improvements to MSPs workflows. Here's a group from Kodo. James was the general manager there. We measured some of their tickets as they used these techniques. They went from, over a period of 3 weeks, they went from having 43 assigned tickets down to about 25, and the stalled tickets, things that weren't moving ahead, they dropped those down from 34 down to it looks like 17 tickets there in 3 weeks. So big help for them. He said, loving the product. Billable time is up and backlog is down, so this stuff can really work. I should warn you though, if you just try to do this without a Kanban board, or if you were to like do it on a physical Kanban board, like, and some people have actually done this. They actually write little sticky notes and they put them on their wall in columns. You can certainly do that, but there are some problems for that. The PSAs, both ConnectWise and AutoTask, they're pretty weak at showing you actionable info. Okay, so it takes a lot of clicks to do anything. It's hard to monitor for those bottlenecks or neglected work. There's no single place where everybody sees that work, and there's no way to order those tickets, which is a pretty important part of the process. You can do those things with a physical Kanban board, sticky notes on the wall, but it's a lot of work. It's not really realistic. Okay, so that's why we built out the Kanban boards that I will show you now. These have really the best of everything. So they're the Kanban boards for visualization, easy management. You can identify those bottlenecks very easily, identify the neglected work. You don't have to waste time entering data because everything comes straight out of your PSA. Everyone sees the work the same way, including people who are remote in your company or working from home or whatever. And you can order the tickets with drag and drop. Very, very easy. So lets you improve the efficiency by, it's a very tight integration with the PSA, with ConnectWise and AutoTask. So it helps you work faster by reducing your clicks. You can actually, what I mean by tight integration is that it allows you to do edit the data in interesting ways with your PSA. So you can actually use TopLeft to unassign or assign members in your team. You can still dispatch to the calendar if you need to, or create service calls. You can enter time and notes on your tickets straight from the app, so helps the engineers actually do it on time. So let me show you a few pictures here of how this works. This is a picture of a very basic Kanban board. You can see we got the columns here, just like we said, new, ready, scheduled, waiting, in progress, and all of this data comes straight out of ConnectWise or AutoTask. And it's just a lot easier to understand. You can the ticket statuses are mapped to the columns, so you can drag and drop between the columns, and that will change the ticket status in your PSA. You can drag and drop them up and down within the columns to rank them. And yeah, it's very, very flexible. You can have as many columns as you want. You can work with any setup that you have with your PSA data. Let me show you a picture here of the swim lanes that we have. So here are the tickets that are not assigned to anybody in this swim lane. And then we have a swim lane here for one engineer, another swim lane for another engineer, and so on for your whole team. So it makes it very, very easy also to see what work is assigned to what person, and show your bottlenecks to see, okay, who has way too much work, maybe even who doesn't have enough work. You can it's really good for using in a daily huddle as well. This is actually what we do in our team. We just go through the swim lanes, swim lane by swim lane, and everybody reports very briefly on what they're doing that day or anything that's blocked and they need help with. So it makes the daily huddles very effective if you do that sort of thing. It also helps you identify the neglected work by these tags that appear automatically on the tickets. Like if an SLA is coming up due, you want to be notified about that. If something is over budget, or if something, like I said, if something is sitting in a certain column for too long, then it will highlight that for you automatically. Also, the engineers see this sort of warning as well, so they can ideally deal with it themselves without bringing in your manager, you, or the dispatcher, right, to help deal with that. So that's kind of that can save everybody work. It also shows when work is assigned. It can help with calendar dispatch. You can show the details of a ticket that has a service call. You can actually see when someone is busy within TopLeft. It'll show what the PSA knows about the person's calendar for that day. So if you do need to put it into the calendar, you will do it at a time when they're not already a time when they're free. It also helps for project stuff. So I know we haven't talked much about project, but most MSPs have some project work as well. And so it could really help with that. So this is a view that is showing just the project tickets, and each swim lane here is an individual project. So here we have a board that's showing us the details of 3 different projects. And it's not a really high level view. It's actually getting us into the details that shows us which tickets have been started, which tickets are complete, which ones are planned out and ready, and yeah, ready for an engineer to do. So it's also very useful for project managers. this is a version. This is a board that's actually showing us our top level projects as well. So it's useful also to see what is our top level project portfolio say. So yeah, customers have really helped. Like the TopLeft has helped a lot of customers. Here are a few things that have been that our customers have told us. Judy from Seattle said in 3 months we improved from 18 block tickets to 11, 34 active tickets down to 11. This one I like. Matthew here from Irving, he said, it's weird that this is the exact same data in a new visual form, but suddenly everybody knows which ticket should have been closed. Well, they just didn't with ConnectWise, right? Like, why not? It's the same information, but somehow now they know. Here's a good one from Brandon in Providence. I saw a ticket that was reopened by dispatch by mistake. Wouldn't have seen that for a few days on the ConnectWise service board. Here's another one. From Roman from Raxos in Surrey says, a senior engineer was doing email setup and signature change tickets. With TopLeft, it was easy to see, to identify those tickets that could be done by a junior tech. So the engineer's work in progress was slashed from 50 tickets to 20. Okay, that's a real difference. And, you know, like someone else said there, like you have this data, this is just an easier way to see it so that you can actually work a lot more effectively. So I want to help you get started. We have a couple of training programs that you can that will help you get started. So one is the concierge onboarding, we call it. That is a 1-hour call where you just so after you sign up and we get connected into your ConnectWise or AutoTask, you just show up for a 1-hour call, and we will set up the first Kanban boards with you. You can start out with our best practices. No stress. You don't have to learn how to use a system. We will teach you how to do it on that call. So that's $299. Help you get started on the right foot. Then we also have the completed ticket challenge, we call it. So that's totally different. That is a 3-week boot camp that helps, where we actually tell you the detailed techniques for finishing work before we start new work. Okay, so there's email and video content a little bit every day, just manageable chunks every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we send out emails with video content. And then Friday, we invite you to the community call. So all of the MSPs that are on the in the program at the time, we get together on Friday for a community call. And we talk about what they learned that week, what was a challenge, talk about the software, like how do they make use of the TopLeft software. And yeah, sometimes I just, I usually coordinate that call. Sometimes I just sit back and let the MSPs talk to each other and kind of solve their own problems. So it's really valuable. That program is $399, and yeah, that's a great way to get started and then to reduce the work in progress. Now, I want to offer you a way to get started with both of those, so that you can solve your problems as fast as possible. So I want to say thank you for coming to the to this webinar today. So our thank you there is this this promo. Okay, so I want to give you both of those plans, both the concierge onboarding and the completed ticket challenge. Normally that would be almost $700, but I wanted to give it to you just for $299. So basically, it's like we give you the completed ticket challenge for free. Here's how you would go about and get that. In fact, I'll show you. So you just go to topleft.team/topleft-trial and put in that code velocity-2206. That'll give you this promo and just until July 1st only. And then you can get started with both those plans, which is the fastest way to get started, and for only $299. So let me show you how to do that. Go to topleft.team/topleft-trial. You're going to pick out your PSA there, whether you're ConnectWise or AutoTask. And here are the options for getting started with the trial. Oh, by the way, the trial is, well, for your trial, because you're going to do the completed ticket challenge, which is 3 weeks, the trial is actually 4 weeks long to make sure that you can get through all that training. And the trial is unlimited licenses. So that's the benefit of the trial. So you're going to use this button here, CTC trial with concierge onboarding. You're going to click that. And you're going to apply the coupon. And it is, what did I say it was? Visualize. no, velocity 2206. Velocity 2206. Okay, apply that code, and now the amount's just $2.99. Okay, so that'll get you started with the completed ticket challenge, the concierge onboarding. That's the 1 hour call where you don't have to prepare at all. You just come, show up, and we'll get you started. We'll set up your application for you and all the Kanban boards and so on. And yeah, that'll be a great start for you, and it's only $2.99. So yeah, we appreciate you coming. And actually, let me clear that. This is that is the button that you want to click there when you go to topleft.team/topleft-trial, and that will get you the yeah, get you that promo so you can get started very quickly. Okay, so I did promise a chance to answer questions. So I don't see any questions yet. So yeah, if you still have questions after all that, then please do go ahead and put that in the chat or the questions section. I'll just wait a moment while you can put in those questions. While we wait, let me explain. Like, some people are concerned about getting started with new software. Like, I could totally understand that. They wonder, am I going to have to make changes to how everything is set up already in ConnectWise or Autotask? Like, I've got a big investment in how I've set up my ConnectWise or set up my Autotask. Like, people have years of investment in these tools. So the answer is no. There's nothing that you must change in your ConnectWise or in your Autotask to be able to take advantage of TopLeft, because we understand that you've got a big investment in how that stuff all works, and we don't want you to have to make big changes, right? So we've made TopLeft to be very flexible, so that pretty much any sort of setup that you have in your PSA is going to work. Very frequently, people start using TopLeft and then they realize, wow, okay, there are some ways that I can make this better. Like, maybe I need some new ticket statuses, or maybe I need to use my existing ticket statuses, but I need to use them differently. Okay, so a lot of people realize that sort of thing once they start to use TopLeft, but it's certainly not the sort of thing that you must do before you use TopLeft, because we made it to be very, very flexible. Another question people have is, do I need to license everyone in my PSA? So maybe you got a bigger MSP, kind of like ours. We've got probably about 30 people licensed in our ConnectWise. Do we need to license everybody because, like, I'm focusing on this for my service team? Or some people come and they focus on it for their project team. I only need it for like my 5 or 6 engineers. So you do not need to license it for everybody in your group. Okay, so if you got 30 people, but you're going to start out with your service team and it's 6 or 7 people, then go ahead. You just license your team, your technicians and your manager within that team, and they'll get all the benefits, and you don't have to worry about licensing everybody. Okay, well, I don't see any questions, so I want to say thank you for everybody who came. We really appreciate it, and hope to see you soon signing up. So just once again, go here to topleft.team /topleft trial. You select your PSA, and then you click this one, the CTC trial with the concierge onboarding, and put in this code here, the velocity -2206, and that is what will get you $3.99 off of that package. So we look forward to seeing you, and thank you again. We really do appreciate you spending this hour with us today. So have a great day.